I love Super 7. I love you guys. You guys are really, really awesome. I love everything you're doing. I've been a supporter for a while and I'm going to continue to be a supporter. And maybe this is probably a good time for the intro. So, what up, everybody? I like to welcome everybody to another episode of No Hype, if that's what we're going to end up calling this. And today I have the wonderful opportunity to have been just spending a couple hours talking to Brian Flynn, the founder of Super 7, who is the real deal. He has done it. He's been there. He got the t-shirt. He wrote the book. Actually, he wrote two books, right? He wrote a bunch of magazines. Yeah,
Yeah, I've written a few books at this point. Yeah.
he lives and eats and breathes and sleeps and shits the stuff. And I'm super grateful to be able to actually have this much of his time because I'm sure he has other things to do rather than nerd out with me for a couple
Are
of
you
hours.
kidding? People are always like, well, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm like, I'm getting to talk about toys. Or collecting. There's nothing better than to always do that. I would love to talk about nothing but toys for a while.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm sorry. My internet literally went down 10 minutes before I had to come on here, and I was just like running around scrambling.
And I'm very offended, and I was, horribly hurt by it. And I'm just kidding. It's only 1 hour. You get a 5-minute grace period on any Zoom call, anyways.
Yeah, I'm just such a I pride myself in being super punctual with anything that I do in life because at the very least I can always, control that. You know what I'm saying?
All too well. All too well. Yeah. I think we almost have the same glasses. Mine are just a little rounder than yours, I think.
I was just looking at that. Like we're like doppelgangers over here.
Yeah. I'm just a little older. That's all. Sure.
Well, that's a future I'm down with, man. So I'm first of all, it's incredibly awesome to finally get to talk to you and meet you.
No, and the same here. You've been doing so much stuff for us for so long. I want to say thank you for that. That's really pretty amazing, and thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. I really enjoy doing it. It's I told Ashley this before. This is clearly not like what I do for a living, but I treat it that way. I just enjoy it. I love collectibles. I've been collecting I never stopped since I was like 4 or 5, whenever my mom bought me my first GI Joes back in the 80s. And I love what y'all are doing because your motto, they didn't make it, so we're decided we're gonna make it. I'm loosely paraphrasing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's kind of like how I structure my life. So I relate to that. If someone else is not doing it, well, fuck it. Let's do it ourselves.
Let's do it ourselves. Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
And you guys do a really, really good job with that. I've been collecting for a while, and I really get excited when I see you guys doing something new or there's a new release, even from the things I don't collect. Because a huge GI Joe head my whole life. I just don't collect GI Joes because I'm not ready to get into that rabbit hole. This hip hop.
It's the same thing. If you try to keep up with, it's like, wait, there's like 9 different people making different things, and then I have to have it all. So it's like, I had to do that once with all the vinyl collecting. I had to just be like, no robots.
Yeah.
No robots. I'm only focusing on tokusatsu and, traditional sort of suit guys like Ultraman and Godzilla and everything. But it's like, if I try to have to get everything that they're making for Great Mazinger and get a Robo and Tetsujin, it's impossible. So guardrail.
Are you like
a completist? You try to collect something with the intent of completing it?
I can't not. I start with I'm just going to get a couple that I want. And then you're like, well, these are pretty cool too. And then, now I got 2/3 of them. Okay, now I got to have everything.
Right. The justification slowly starts to creep in.
I know what will happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's exactly
my problem. That's why at some point I decided to just stick to hip hop stuff, and by any stretch, if I can connect it to hip hop, I will buy it. Like this right here. Um,
Rapping Mike, yeah.
Rapping Mike, dude, you guys did such a good job on this figure, and I really like. I picked up on some things, and I wanted to know if my observations were accurate. On the OG version, there was a lot of like kind of like cliche.
Yeah. Do you want to save this for the interview?
Oh, I already thought we started.
All right, all right, all
Oh yeah,
right.
we're recording it. It recorded as soon as we started.
It's yeah, but some people like to be real formal about it and everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe some point I'll do the intro at some point in this. But like, I feel like yo, we're in a groove right now. Like, and I don't want to.
Yeah,
Break
yeah,
your
yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
there was some definite, like, first off, we're not giving him the clock. All right. The clock
Okay.
is Flavor Flav only. And that was Public Enemy. And it was great. And I think people in the case of like, probably I'm speaking for the guy that's designing TMNT. He's just like, that's a ridiculous accessory. How funny is that? We'll put it on him. Sort of like, oh, we got to put the hat sideways.
Right,
You know, and it's just like, no, that comes off as cornball as hell.
right.
Like everybody else was at that time was wearing medallions, like especially, you know, Africa medallions, red, black, and green, everything. But the clock is just
Yeah.
Flavor Flav only. And you have to know his place within Public Enemy.
Right.
Like, that is so like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle rocking a clock is like, oh, come on, that's not cool.
Not only that, it just felt like whoever designed it just grabbed a bunch of things that they thought was represented hip hop at that time. Because I felt like in the OG version, there's even some like Vanilla Ice type looking stuff on there, you know. And I think what you guys did was like you kind of rewrote what they should have done the first time, and they could have done, and it would have been equally dope. Like, dude, shell shock on the pant leg, no brainer.
Yeah. Now, you know, and I'd say I had a little bit, but a lot of that is the team too. So Kyle and Michael and Josh that were all working on Turtles also were weighing in on this too. So everybody was sort of talking about it. So I want to make sure that they, you know, it's not just like, oh, what did you do? It's like, no, there's a group, and definitely that team is spearheading it. But a lot of it was like, if you think about the 80s, like they were taking a pastiche of it. Probably no different than when we're like, oh, it's Samurai Dawn. And we're like, it's so cool. There's probably a guy in Japan and be like, yo, that is not a samurai.
Right.
Like, you took the worst stereotype in the world. So I think when you're talking about hip hop in the 80s, especially, people have no real idea unless you're in it, what it is. They're still like, oh, we should give them a piece of cardboard because everybody that's in the hip hop breakdances, right?
Of course, yeah. A spray
And we got to put them in a tracksuit, you know?
Yeah.
We can't give them a Kangol because we'll get sued. Like, it's just sort of like the tropes that come up, right? You know, rather than like, we're going to make them a custom jacket, but they're not going to be like, oh, we should talk to Dapper Dan.
Right,
They
right.
don't know that that's a thing in New York.
Right, right.
Oh, you make a big custom jacket.
Right. And I guess, you know, in their defense, the internet and everything wasn't so plentiful out there. So I guess they probably just had to kind of wing it by what they thought. But one cool thing, I wanted to point this out because I don't think anyone may have noticed this on the boombox, which I love how you did one side boombox, one side turntable. When I say you, I mean everybody at Super 7, the team.
I want to give credit to the crew.
And they do deserve credit for this. So from this and the OG, one thing I noticed is, are you familiar with what today's DJ setup looks like?
Are we talking about a real DJ? Or are we talking about the guy that has the thing that he plugs his laptop into?
Well, I mean, even real DJs use those controllers now. They just use more expensive versions of them.
Yeah.
So
when I don't think anybody who designed the original version or this one really thought about back then. They kind of like foreshadowed one of those things that you see in a movie or a video game or something that actually came to life. That was like the original DJ controller. It was like one solid piece, and it had the turntables and the mixer.
The fader and everything going back and forth.
Yeah, and I think they kind of like foreshadowed that, and like subconsciously that actually ended up coming to life.
Is that like tricorders or iPhones?
Yes, there you go. Absolutely. So So I want to know actually one thing. I was super curious because me and my boys have kind of taken this journey into starting like a small toy company, and we do super like limited licensed runs with some of the people that we would like to see. Kind of exactly how you guys how Super Seven does it.
Yeah.
How did Super Seven start? Like how did you come about? And
Ooh.
Into this world?
All right. This is going to take a hot minute. So everybody, grab a pillow, get a nice beverage, Now, so the oversimplification of it, we go way back, like, is started off as a magazine about collecting toys. But even before that, I'm a collector growing up in punk rock and skateboarding, especially. We used to make fanzines all the time, photocopied fanzines. And then I went to school, got my design degree, worked at Fossil Watches for a little while, worked at Nike for a number of years. And then I left, in 2000 and moved to San Francisco. And I met up with a bunch of people that were here. And they were putting together a book for Chronicle Books called So Crazy Japanese Toys. And so that book is about a third my collection, a third Mark Nagata's collection, and a third Kimono My House's collection. And they just sort of took pictures of toys they thought looked crazy. There wasn't any rhyme or it was purely an aesthetic thing. And they'd take it and put it on like a furry orange background or something like that. How do I make this just look, it's crazy, rather than like, hey, let's dissect this or make this any sort of reference material, right? After that book was done, Chronicle was like, cool, we want a sequel. And the guy that did the first book was like, I'm not into it. And I was like, I'm not willing to put together a book, but I would do a magazine. Because if I take what I did growing up in fanzine, where you just basically photocopy it, try to break even, hope for the best. Like you're making it to put it out there. You're not making it with the intent to make money. I was like, I would do a fanzine, but as a working graphic designer, I can make it look like a magazine. So the very first, the whole point of Super 7 when it started was a magazine about collecting toys. And I think at the time, the exact numbers, but it was more or less $5,000 to print the magazine.
At that time, did you ever think that toy making was gonna like in your mind? Did you ever want to make toys back then before you even started?
There's sort of two different things. So in the very first issue, we did have toys available. So I'll jump into that. So in Japan at that time, to help you make sure you bought issues of Hyper Hobby or Figure King, in the middle of the magazine, they would partner with a vinyl manufacturer or a toy manufacturer for an exclusive recolor. But you had to buy the magazine and then cut the coupon out. They wouldn't take copies of the middle of the magazine and then send them a check with the coupon to get the recolor. And I thought that was such a fucking cool thing.
Love it.
Because you've got a collector and you're going to make them destroy the magazine. Like, I don't know about you, but that gives me palpitations just thinking about it. Like,
100%. I'm smiling. As soon as you said that, I started smiling.
I love the fact that it was so messed up to the person that was getting it. I was like, I want to replicate that experience for this magazine. So we reached out to a bunch of different companies that we knew in Japan, and we ended up doing 2 vinyl exclusives in the first issue. It was a recolor of a Bear Model 54 Godzilla in clear gray and an M1 Gorgo painted like the flesh bullmark Godzilla.
And this was like officially licensed stuff? Like
officially licensed stuff. So what it was we went to somebody in Japan that was making the toys, and we say, all right, we want to do this for the magazine. They know the model because they do it in Japan. Mm-hmm. They're like, cool, you guys run the promotion. We'll make a sample. You tell us how many you need made, send us the money. We make it and we give it to you. So they make it in Japan, finish it, and then send it over. So we don't have the license.
Right.
Like we're working on the manufacturer's license.
But you're still making the stuff. So
you're still making the stuff. And so that went pretty well, which is cool, right?
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, let's go. So then with the next issue of the magazine, if you're you got to remember also collecting Godzilla toys at this time in the year 2000 was a very small affair, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people doing it. So you got some dudes in America that want to buy 150, 200 pieces of a release. Oh, sign me up. Like, let's go. So when we were like getting ready for issue 2, a bunch of them were like, all right, well, what do you want this time? Where last time we sort of took a little bit of what they were offering us. So they were like, oh, you got another one coming. I want that business. What are you going to do? So then we started looking at their tooling bank, if you will, the vinyls they had made, and we started recoloring them in ways that we thought were interesting. And I think it's very important to sort of talk about American Japanese toy collectors versus Japanese toy collectors. Most people that buy monster toys, Japanese tokusatsu, whatever, Mazinger, most of us have not seen the shows in depth that they reference, right? We might have seen some Godzilla movies. You've seen a couple episodes of Ultra 7. You might have seen a little bit of Giant Robot or whatever. But, you haven't watched Henshin. I'm assuming you haven't watched Henshin Ninja Arashi or Tiger 7 or any of this other stuff. You just see the toys in a vacuum and look at the aesthetics and go, oh my God, what's that?
Right.
I want that. So we, as collectors, look at all those toys from an aesthetic point of view. So when we started making recolors, we were making recolors from an aesthetic point of view, not an analytical or referential point of view. The point I'm making is like, right at that time, it was very popular to be like, oh, we're going to make an edition of this vinyl, but we're going to make it as a Marathon first version, which means navy blue with silver spray. Or we're going to make it a Marathon second version, brown vinyl with silver spray. It makes sense historically. It may not be the most appealing, but if you're in the weeds, you know the reference. And when we went over there, I was like, I want Hedorah the Smog Monster. And they're like, nobody wants Hedorah. I'm like, are you kidding? Everybody wants Hedorah is the best Godzilla monster out there. It's a giant sludge of pollution. And I want it in clear orange with red and yellow highlights. And we're going to call it Meltdown Hedorah. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this makes no sense. We're like, I know. But then they make it and you see it and you're just like, this thing is bonkers. And they start selling like crazy. Wow. Not only to Americans, but to Japanese collectors, because it's all of a sudden it's a whole new look and feel. Wow. Classic kaiju. Because, we're coming in and just saying, it's not true to say it's just superficial, but we're saying superficially, let's go over this. And it's like imagining like one day you're wearing Levi's and somebody shows up with tie-dye. You're like, well, what's going on where did this tie-dye come from? This is crazy. So that sort of started where it was like, all of a sudden, then people were coming to us saying, hey, can you make a recolor for us? Can you make a recolor for us? And then, well, what sculpts do you want next? Because now we're selling pretty good volume. Oh, we'll make sculpts that you want. What do you want? We made a lot of Hedorah sculpts. Same thing, the giant Marathon Godzilla, like the bull mark, I never liked. So I was like, take the 9-inch and make it giant size. That's what I want on my shelf. We started making shelf fillers. Like they made this at 5-inch and 9-inch and 12-inch, but they never made the 10-inch. Make the 10-inch version. Stuff like that. And then that led into us actually creating some of our own toys in Japan, own designs, like the Ghost Fighter in collaboration with Secret Base and a few other things. And we probably did that for about 10, 11, 12 years. So it was at the point where we'd opened a little bit later, the second version of the store. So like I said, get a pillow. And in the second version of the store, we always made the joke about toy collectors. We're like, oh, all right, you live in your mom's basement, your grandma's house, or whatever. So we're like, what if we made the store look like the basement in your grandma's house? And we're like, okay, what that would look like, though, is your grandma would have that old burgundy flocked Victorian wallpaper, right? So we made flocked Victorian wallpaper for the store, but the pattern was all the dead characters from Star Wars.
Wow, that's fire.
And so a friend of mine came in not that long after. He's a photographer and toy dealer up in Canada named Shane Turgeon. And Shane came into the store and he's like, you should get this licensed. We're like, we're not going to get this licensed. Come on, give me a break. Like, we're not huge. He's like, you should talk to my friend Steve. And I was like, Steve? Turns out his friend Steve is Steve Sansweet. I don't know if you know who Steve Sansweet is, but every Star Wars collecting book you've ever seen from the 90s on up has been written by Steve Sansweet. There's a few now by Gus and everybody else, but Steve Sansweet's guy. The Star Wars Museum, that's Steve Sansweet. He worked at Lucasfilm. So we go to see Steve Sansweet. I'm like, holy shit, I'm meeting Steve Sansweet. You know? And he's like, this is really cool. Hold on. And he goes and grabs the head of licensing, brings him in the room, and he's like, this is really cool. What do you guys do? And we show him all the vinyl figures that we make. And he was the guy that had been in charge of international licensing for Lucasfilm. So he gave Medicom the Kubrick license. So when we said, oh, here's all the stuff we make it all over in Japan and do all this stuff. He's like, oh, I didn't know anybody in America was doing this. That's really cool. What do you want to do? Now we have to work around Hasbro because they have a toy license. So in the end, what we ended up making was the Super Shogun Stormtrooper. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have seen that. Yes.
Okay. Wild. So it's 2 feet tall. It's $300. It's not competing with Hasbro. But for me growing up, it's like we had Shogun Warriors, you know, and we had Star Wars figures. I want to put my peanut butter in my chocolate in my peanut butter. So I want a Super Shogun Stormtrooper. And that was the first time we made a toy. We didn't realize it where, you know, we're moving into sort of traditional toy making versus vinyl. And all of a sudden we're making a toy while we've sold to Americans for an American audience. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And we kind of bet the farm on the Stormtrooper. I was basically like, it's either going to work or we go out of business, but I got to make a Stormtrooper. Who cares? And the Stormtrooper worked. It took a lot longer than we thought. And so when we were done sort of with the Stormtrooper, we had a pile of money left over. And we're like, all right, what's next? Well, what's next is supposed to be Boba Fett. But I'm like, if this is going to take another 3 years to get done, like, we'll burn through all this money just trying to get it done. And we were brainstorming about what to do. And I was like, the thing I want most is the unreleased Alien figures from 1979. Wow. So if we take a step back for anybody else, post Star Wars, 1977, the movie comes out, it's a bonanza. And then the licensing hits in 78, and it's making more money than the film. The film, exactly. So at that time, anything space gets greenlit, and anything space gets licensed for toys. So Kenner has a first look deal with 20th Century. They sign Alien, and they don't really know it's an R-rated horror movie. So they're just making stuff. So they rush the 18-inch Alien out in time for Christmas, and they're working on a whole line of Star Wars size Alien figures. Needless to say, the line immediately gets canceled after that. You know, because how many kids are supposed to be buying Alien figures?
Right.
Not many is the correct answer. And so in collecting years in either 92 or 93, Home Arts had a cover story on the lost prototypes of Alien. And ever since then, as a toy collector, I've just been like, that's been the holy grail, the thing you never knew you could have. Were, imagine Alien figures that came out at the same time as Star Wars. So I was like, let's go make that. So we went to Fox to get the license, and they were like, because we had made the Stormtrooper with Lucasfilm, they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. And nobody's making anything with Alien. We don't care. We tracked down the original prototypes. We modified them slightly so you couldn't pass off ours as originals, and then reissued it. And that was the first reaction figure. Now, at the time, when we went to San Diego Comic-Con, We were going to San Diego Comic-Con now 11 years ago with these, and they were $20 then. Low likeness, low paint app, retro style. We did not think that in any way, shape, or form was a recipe for success. That was the time when Hasbro had just come out with the multi-articulated Stormtrooper. So for $7.99 to $9.99, you could get this figure with 75 paint apps, ball joints, and everything.
Right.
Like, the market was high paint, high articulation, high likeness, low price. So we're like, let's do high price, low articulation, low likeness. Everybody's going to love it, right? So we literally went to San Diego hoping to sell through half the units we brought and that the rest would come later. And we showed up to San Diego and we sold out of everything on preview night. And what we didn't realize was that there was a whole generation of people just like myself that, hey, this new Stormtrooper is great, but give me something that feels like it felt like when I was a kid.
Right.
And that was the beginning of, so when you say, did you ever think about making a toy? I would never have conceived. We just sort of went down this road of like, how do I make something for my collection? And I don't think anybody else cares but a couple other nerds than me. Like, how many people even knew that they prototyped alien figures back in the day? Like, who's going to care?
Yeah, as you're saying that, in my mind, I'm like, he's right. I never seen any alien figures, but if I didn't have this conversation with you, I would think that I have seen them before just because I know that you guys released them before. So that already, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's kind of like a kismet, right?
It's sort of a thing where, people ask me, how did you get into the industry? It's like, you don't sort of get into the industry. You just start doing it. It's a thing. So like you coming up through music, it's not like you had an official degree or stamp. You just started doing stuff. And then somebody told somebody else, or then something worked and it slowly built up. And next thing you know, people are recommending you because like, oh, you should talk to this guy because he's good at this. And you're like, when did I become official? Well, you just started doing it and then it happened.
That's and the cool thing is what I really love about Super 7. Everything feels authentic. It feels like everybody loves toys. Everybody loves what they're into, and it's just like one cohesive group of people, and y'all create just some incredible stuff. And with the reaction figures, being a collector, like the pit of money spending, right? So like
a $20 figure
for an adult like me, even if it comes out frequently, I'm like, okay, cool. Cause I just keep saying, well, I spent $20 on whatever the hell that I'll never see.
You can't even buy a sandwich for $20 anymore.
Right, exactly. So like, for a $20 reaction figure, like sign me up all day. All day I'm down. You guys do such a great job with it. And I think you guys, especially with the licensing stuff, the music in the music realm, I want to get into the punk stuff too. When I grew up in the 90s, it was like hip hop nonstop, reggae. And then I moved to Vegas in 96 for 1 year and I got introduced to like punk, ska, going to concerts in coffee shops, like things that I didn't know existed. I never saw in Queens or in the Bronx. Like, I didn't even know that world, and that messed me up. And then I found raves and that messed me up even more. Like, I found this whole world of stuff. And like, when I see the punk stuff and I see that, I'm like, oh my God, if they do grunge, if you guys start doing like Pearl Jam stuff, and like, I'm done. Like, my life is over. My wife is going to divorce me. Cause like, it's hard for me to say no. If I saw like a Sublime, or, just a Goldfinger, or just anything that from that time, I'll be like, that's it. It's done. I'm like, I'm
it's done.
It's done.
Yeah, but it's funny because, this was stuff that I brought in for something else. And I knew we were talking and I knew you were a tape guy. I just thought you would find this funny because for people that don't sort of like in the 80s, like how punk was very insular and non-mainstream, but hip hop was becoming mainstream, but it still was. And how overlapped those things are. Like, this is a really funny tape. So it's like, I don't know if you can see it, but it's Public Enemy, and Dag Nasty.
Dag
And
Nasty.
the other side is Slayer, South of Heaven.
Wow.
You know, that's the tape you had when you were a kid.
That's one of your mixtapes?
It Takes a Nation of Millions, South of Heaven, and Dag Nasty's Can I Say. So you got a punk band, a thrash band, and a hip hop band all on one tape. And like, this makes complete sense.
100%. It makes more sense than people would even realize. So speaking of music, right? A lot of the hip hop stuff that Super7 does, what was like the decision making behind just even first getting into hip hop? Because I know one day I just saw an Old Dirty Bastard figure. I'm not sure where I saw it, but I saw it and I
That's
bought
the
three.
figure that broke the dam. That's the figure that broke the dam. There was a few before that. Ironically, we didn't even think, we were just sort of locked in like He-Man, Master of the Universe, Turtles, Thundercats. We were locked into sort of what you would typically think of as toy collecting sci-fi stuff. And a friend of mine, Brian Christner, who's a music lawyer, was in town. We were out to dinner and we were just chatting, and he was like talking about, oh, I'm doing this thing with King. I'm doing this thing with King. And I was like, what are you talking about? Who's King? He's like, King Diamond. I was like, what? You're working with King Diamond? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, it would be so messed up to make a toy of King Diamond. It was just wrong. So wrong. Like, he's fantastical parody guy, but it's all like over the top satanic and everything else like this. So I was like, so we should make a toy of King. And so we got to make a toy of King. Now, we had already made some stuff with Gorilla Biscuits, because Gorilla Biscuits figures, character looks like a toy. We made a soft vinyl figure of that. But this was the first time we were like, we should make a reaction figure of King Diamond, because that's messed up. And it sold like crazy. We're like, oh, wait, music, there's something here. What else would we want to do? And right at the same time, we got offered Breakin'.
Okay.
Movie.
Got those.
We did Breakin'. And I was like, we need Run DMC. Because I want to, to start at the top. And so we went out and got Run DMC too, because they had just signed with a licensing agent that we knew. And he was like, oh, are you any interested in Run DMC? And we're like, King Diamond worked. Let's try Run. Like, this would be great. And all of it worked really well. Like, people were like, oh my God, you made the broom with Breakin'. I'm like, of course I made the broom.
Dude, yeah, I got all versions of the Breakin' ones, and then when I realized I didn't have was it Turbo? It was like the super hard one for me to find. Yeah. Boogaloo Shrimp is Turbo, right? Yeah.
And great dude, by the way. Amazing dude.
Oh, yeah, I followed him on Instagram. I think he follows me on TikTok, whatever. He is a super down to earth dude.
Great. Like, we reached out to him and like, hey, because in a case like this, he doesn't have likeness rights. The movie owns it. So we still reached out to him and said, hey, this is what we're doing. Do you want to be involved? What do you want? And he was like, sure, it'd be great. And we sent him, he was like, can you send me some product? Can you do this? Can I send some to my family? We're like, as much as you want, anything you want, you just let us know.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was just super, super cool. Super cool. Yeah, so I can't say enough nice things about Boogaloo Shrimp.
That was a hard one for me to find for some reason. Like, I would search high and low for that everywhere, and for some reason I couldn't find that. And online, that's like, I don't know now. It's been years since I looked it up because I have them. It was the most expensive one, like on the resale market. That one for
some reason. But back to your question. So after we did Breakin' and that first 3-pack blew out, we remade it. The second 3-pack, people were like, fool, I bought the first one. I don't need the second one. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe they'll go back to the well. We put out the deluxe box set and people are like, I don't need that. Right. And Run did well. And then we were just like, oh, gloves are off a little bit. Like, let's go. What do we want to make? It's always been a little trickier with hip hop because getting to the artists, because of the nature of hip hop to a degree, no one really believes you when you show up and say, I'm going to do this and this is how much I'm going to pay you, and then I'll pay you royalties. They're like, yeah, no.
Right.
That's so it's been sort of a longer haul of just getting, you put out more stuff. You put out more stuff. People check with your friends. How was their experience? Oh, those guys actually paid me and we made a lot of money. And like, oh, okay. Now I'm open to it. But it's like it's been a much slower, pickup on all that. But it's so cool. It's so fun. But like same thing, like we made Run DMC. We made a couple other things before ODB. And ironically, how we made ODB is Anita Castellar, Fangirl Licensing, runs the licensing for the Old Dirty Bastard estate. She is who worked with us on the licensing side at Lucasfilm when we made the Stormtrooper. And she was great to us then. And we had just kept in touch over the years and over the years. She left Lucasfilm, started her own licensing group, did all this other stuff. And then I get an email from her one day like, hey, I just signed Old Dirty Bastard. Is there any interest? And we're just like, can we do a figure?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing. We made that Old Dirty. We put it on the welfare card, made it look like, and that's the one where that's the moment the people mostly became aware, because that figure took off in a way that Run DMC and Breakin' and the other stuff did not. And then it was like, I know this shit. Okay, let's go.
That's the first Super 7 figure I remember buying, but I felt like Run DMC came after ODB for some reason.
It got reissued.
Okay.
So this is the funny part. In the very first version, we made an error. They're wearing dark blue Levi's. And they're like, no.
Okay, so I have those.
Blue pants. We wear black pants. So it got reissued with black pants. But all of a sudden, there was more demand, and we were sold out of Run DMC. So we remade Run DMC, and we corrected the color of their pants. Sorry, I said Levi's, Wranglers. Wear black Wranglers. Come on.
Wow. That's
somebody
crazy.
Already was just like, yo, dog, he doesn't know nothing. They're in Wranglers. I'm like, yeah, no.
All right, man.
Calm down, guys. Calm down. It's funny. I wanted to ask you this for a very long time now. The Def Jam Soundwave figures.
Yes.
Right?
You said that you were going to ask about that, so I grabbed one.
So, one day I was like kind of looking at it, messing around. And then when I rubbed my finger across, I felt like it was a sticker. So I start going on Google and trying to figure out, how do I get this off? I'm watching tutorials. So I got a blow dryer and I completely messed it up. And then I went on the network app one of these days, and they had this crazy sale, and they were like $5 a piece. And I bought as many of them as I could potentially be allowed to buy. And I bought a bunch of them. They get to my house, they're all dinged up and damaged. So I'm like messing with it. I finally start getting them off. And then I see that it says LL Cool J underneath.
Yes. So the story on this was Def Jam's 35th anniversary. They came to us very late in the game through network, said, hey, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff for Def Jam's 35th anniversary. What can we do? And I was like, there's no way to make something new. We don't have enough time. So we have to use something that exists. And we were going back and forth on all this stuff. And I said, well, LL Cool J's first single, Radio, Can't Live Without My Radio. Soundwave has a radio. So why don't we make an LL Cool J version of Soundwave? So, and we'll make, the die cut cassette tape. So instead of Laserbeak or whatever, it's an LL Cool J tape that goes into Soundwave. And Soundwave's boombox, the whole, there's a story there that makes sense. And so it got printed and done. And then I think in the end, what happened was that Def Jam hadn't cleared everything with LL. So,
which is the one guy on Def Jam who could really say, nah, this ain't happening, because he owns all of his shit. He's almost like pretty much an owner of Def Jam in a unofficial way,
So what happened was they were like, oh no, we got to change this. We're like, it's too late. It's already printed. But then we were like, let's just make the sticker. So it's almost like a cassette tape.
Yeah.
and I was like, and the stickers got, you see the original where it's printed, but it's like, it's got to be crooked because you never got that little sticker on straight. And so they changed it to Def Jam instead of LL Cool J.
To me, that is so dope. That story is so dope. And like when I found it, I thought I felt special. Like I'm like, oh, I discovered something.
Well, and quite frankly, it's one of those things where, we made it for network. There weren't a lot of them made, but no one was looking at network at that moment to find something like this. So they kind of languished around for a while. And I don't know, I haven't looked, but I'm going to make the assumption if you go looking for them right now, they're not as easy to find as they were. It's sort of like Power of the Force for Star Wars, the original 85 Power of the Force. They were in clearance bins for now, and now they're the most expensive figures that they made.
Right.
That's usually how it works. All the things that kind of go under the radar when people.
Is that why you bought so many?
No, I bought so many
just to figure out what was under the sticker.
Yeah, and I wanted, I just got such a thrill from tinkering. In a matter of fact, I have mine graded. The best one that I was able to remove, I have it graded. And I had an interview, and I'll send you a clip when we're done. But I had an interview with the master grader from the company, and I showed it to him, and he's like, yeah, I wouldn't remove the sticker off this and have it graded. You're kind of defacing. He went into this like super technical reason.
Yeah, well, technically that's not how it came on shelf. So you've actually removed one piece. It's no longer complete.
Right. Well, I was just so I don't
care.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah, I wanted to preserve the story behind it because I felt like a lot of the things that we collect are awesome because of the nostalgia, but then the story connected to whatever that is makes it even more special, So like here I am with this figure. If people never come over, but if they ever do and they ask me about it, there's an awesome story, behind it, and that's why it's encapsulated and graded. It didn't get a good grade either, but
because you took the sticker off.
Yeah, I was like, fuck it. I don't know.
But that's another thing. I don't know when you got it and you were like, oh wait, they did, Sound Blaster, where you're like, oh, that makes sense. I get it. Or you're like, I don't understand.
No, I got it. I instantly made sense. I did think though that Blaster, because of the boombox and Ghetto Blaster specifically, would have been the one. But your explanation, I don't know if you guys ever done a Blaster?
Yeah, we've done Sound Blaster and Soundwave because it's just the same figure in blue versus black.
Yeah.
So in this case, we were trying to make it look more like the radio on the cover of the LL Cool J radio, but they also needed to be purple because that's what Def Jam was doing for their whole thing was purple for the 35th anniversary.
Yeah. I think it works. Either one of them would have worked, but I got it instantaneously, And then when I peeled it open and I saw, I was like, it still, it definitely made sense.
Yeah, it makes a little when you go, oh, LL Cool J radio. Okay, I get it. Like
plus Soundwave is the one thing that I do collect outside of, my
typical hip hop stuff. So
I don't think I do. I was about to say, do I have that here? The irony is I had some records up here and I don't have radio up here. So
I have a Soundwave, the OG Soundwaves, OG Blasters. If I find a reissue somewhere, I'll grab those too, just because that's kind of my little hip hop connection right into, into mixed with the nostalgia stuff. So like I said,
do you have the cyborgs that we made?
I don't.
Oh, see?
I don't.
See? All right. So you got to hit up.
I need those. Yeah. I would love to. So I see you guys are doing a Tribe Called Quest figure. You guys announced it. Can you tell me what is that going to be, or is that top secret yet?
It's still a little top secret, but we put together a whole sort of plan and program around them. We initially started talking to them 2 years ago, right when it was, I don't even remember what the anniversary was, 30th anniversary, 35th anniversary of People's Instinctive Travels. And I was like, oh man, let's do, if we could do a pop-up launch event in El Segundo at a diner, oh my God, would be insane. Like,
Let me know, bro. I'm gonna try to fly out there.
so we first started talking to him about this anniversary for the album. We were trying to put together, we pitched a whole idea around a pop-up event that would happen in El Segundo. We take over a diner, we do an album re-release, and we make merch for it, and it included figures. But that never really came together. But a couple, we still stayed in touch and kept kind of trying to get it over the finish line. And so it finally sort of came together at the end of last year, and we're working on stuff. So we're going to start with people's instinctive travels and sort of go from there. But there's a bunch of cool ideas. It'll just be sort of how far and how excited people get for it.
Can you say if they're going to be figures of the group members, or is it going to be like
we're going to start with the group? Yes, okay. I'm not just going to do a black figure with green and red stripes. If that
okay, yeah. All right, cool. Because no, I that's what I was hoping for, but you just don't know sometimes. Like things can get weird with licensing stuff. And,
it's not that there's a time and place for that too, but that's not where I want to start. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, 100%. I would love to see a Tribe Called Quest action figures, mostly because like I don't understand why this idea never occurred to anyone in the 90s,
I mean, it's not even so much in the 90s and the early 2000s. Maybe it's 90s. There's a few things get out there, but they're all really bad. Like there's a Master P figure.
I got them both.
Snoop figure.
Have you seen this? Hold on. Sorry.
The Master P figure that came out in like, is it late 90s?
I just broke everything trying to get this. So this is the first Master P. I don't know if you could.
I never saw that one.
This one is horrible. He's wearing like a crop top. And I mean, it's really, really bad. No Limit Toys, Only God Can Judge Me. Super, super rare to even find.
Was it like an album promo or was it for sale?
I can't find any information on this at all anywhere. Like the fact I am the only, if you Google this figure, my video will pop up. I'm the only source of information on this. This is a super, super rare one. I have one out of the box.
Strikes me by the way of the back of it is that it almost looks like it's an album promo, except it's got a UPC. If it didn't have that UPC on it, I'd been like, oh, that's an album promo that they sent out. But with the UPC, that meant it was for sale.
It says imported by DSK Premium Supplies Limited and out of Hong Kong.
I don't know. See, I'm learning something new with you. Here we go.
So I have a few
where they did the 12-inch dolls with the bad clothes and everything.
Right.
And like, so if somebody said, "Oh, I want to make a toy of you," you're like, "Man, that's not cool."
Yeah. I think that's probably. I would agree. I probably think that they would think the same thing. But the popularity of them now. I remember like the first Mezco Run DMC, the small ones. The Mezits that came out back in the day, I had those. That was like 2004, maybe 2005, somewhere around that time. But there's been the reason I say like now, why didn't think about it then? Because they're so popular now with the older people. And I think they would have been popular with the younger people because I was a 13-year-old consuming hip hop. I was listening to Wu-Tang 13, and if I saw a Wu-Tang action figure, I would have probably bought it and got made fun of, but I definitely would have bought it,
I'm trying to work my way through Wu-Tang. I'm getting there.
That's going to be a tough one.
I've got Ghostface. I got ODB. I cannot get Raekwon locked down. I've been trying like crazy for several years.
As far as bootleg toys, like when people can't make them officially, so then they make.
There's a whole lot of people making bootleg toys. I mean, Trap Toys has been doing it forever.
Yeah,
everything, and they're all. I mean,
what do you think about bootlegs?
It's cool. I think it's cool. I think it's cool when you're making runs of 5 or 10 and people are excited about it. I mean, I understand on the artist side, they'd be like, why are you making this thing of me? But it's like, when you're making 5 or 10 of something, it's still you and your friends. I think it starts to get into a weird zone when it's like, oh, we're going to make 50 or we're going to make 100. Mm-hmm. Then it's like, now it's not really sort of like fan service anymore,
Right.
But there's so much cool stuff that's being made by, the bootleg people at this point. Like And especially in music and hip hop, it's like game over. Like you name it at this point, it's been done. But it's cool.